Hello, and welcome to Short Stories. I'm your host, Martin. The story I have chosen today is based on a tale from Giambattista Basile's Pentamerone. It's called The Enchanted Snake. It bears remarkable similarities with the old Chinese fairy tale, The Legend of the White Snake, which is one reason why I chose to adapt this story. Another remarkable thing about this tale is that it appears to be two stories that were smashed together. The first half of the story follows the prince overcomes challenges to win the princess plot. But the second half follows the princess goes on a quest to save her lover plot. Both of these plots are quite common in old fairy tales. You can probably recognize them in some of my other videos. There's also the theme of human-animal transformation, which appears in many folktales. Vocabulary: scaly, scaly. The scaly lizard crawled on the floor. Lackadaisical, lackadaisical. The lackadaisical students neglected to do their homework. Slither, slither. The snake slithered into its hole. Nerves are shot. Nerves are shot. After the battle, the soldiers' nerves were shot. Miracle, miracle. It would take a miracle to create world peace. Cure, cure. The doctor found the cure for cancer. Virtuous, virtuous. A good gentleman is always virtuous and benevolent. Copse, copse. The deer leaped through the copse. The story. A long time ago in the kingdom of Campo Lungo, there lived a gardener with his wife. The gardener's name was Matteo, and his wife was named Sapatella. They had been married for a long time, but did not have any children. This distressed Sapatella very much. "I'd love to have a child," she had told Matteo. "I don't care what it looks like. Any child would be a blessing." She was as anxious for a child as a farmer is anxious for rain during a drought. One day, while collecting firewood, she discovered a small white snake in a bundle of sticks. She was shocked at first, but soon found herself enchanted by this strange-looking serpent. "Ay me, even the snakes have babies. Why can't I?" she said to herself. The snake was listening and replied, "I'll be your son, ma'am. In fact, I'll love you more than my own mother." Sapatella fell backwards onto her backside in shock. But since the snake was so small and seemed so harmless, she soon recovered herself and said, "If that is what you wish, I will gladly be your new mother." She picked up her slithery son and took him home. Matteo was a bit puzzled by his wife's new pet. "He's not a pet," she explained. "He's our adopted son." Matteo scratched his beard and said, "Does he have a name?" The snake responded by saying, "You can call me Serpeggio." Just like his wife, Matteo fell flat on his fundament when he heard the snake speak, but he soon got over his fear and learned to love his scaly son. Over the next 7 years, the snake grew to an immense size. He was long enough to wrap himself around the gardener's humble cottage. One day, the snake asked his father, "I'd like to get married to the princess." Matteo scratched his beard and said, "You're kidding, right?" The snake shook his head. "No, father, I am quite serious. Petition the king to let me marry his daughter. I would be very grateful to you." Matteo shrugged his shoulders and went to the palace the next day. Every Tuesday, King Stolto of Campolungo opened his palace to petitioners. They would line up very early in the morning and wait patiently all day to plead their cases. It was as tiresome as learning calculus from a turtle. But Matteo waited without complaint until his turn arrived. "Please state your name and district for the record," said the lackadaisical secretary. "Matteo the gardener, of Kola district," was the answer. King Stolto was seated on his throne at the end of the room. He beckoned Matteo to step forward with his left hand because his right hand was occupied with supporting his languid head. "Make your plea," commanded the king. Matteo told the king about his son and his desire to marry the princess. King Stolto lifted his head off his hand and said, "You're kidding, right?" Matteo shook his head. "I thought he was kidding too, but he's serious about marrying her." Stolto burst into laughter. "My daughter, marry your son, a gardener." Matteo was a simple man who had little experience dealing with high society, so he wasn't quite sure how to take the king's response. He began nervously laughing with Stolto. "I'll let him marry my daughter," the king said between bouts of laughter, "if he can grow an entire orchard of golden fruit." Matteo thanked King Stolto and rushed out the door. When Matteo related the king's response, Serpeggio sat silently for a few minutes, scratching his chin with his tail. Finally he said, "Go to the fruit market and gather all the discarded pits and stones you can find. Take them to King Stolto's garden and plant them. Tomorrow morning the king will have to let me marry his daughter." Matteo shrugged his shoulders and did as his son suggested. The next morning the king awoke and saw, to his great astonishment, that his garden was filled with golden fruit trees. He plucked a golden cherry and tasted it. "Delicious!" he declared. King Stolto summoned Matteo to the castle that afternoon. "Your son must be the most amazing gardener in the world," said the king. "He is certainly one of a kind," agreed Matteo. Stolto asked his daughter if she was willing to marry Serpeggio. "You will know the quality of a tree by the fruit that it bears," she said. "Serpeggio must have a truly noble spirit. I will marry him." The king clapped his hands and announced that the wedding would take place the following day. The next day the castle was full of the king's relatives and retainers. All the guests arrived in their finest clothes for the special occasion. The princess, who was named Granonia, was the most splendidly dressed of them all. She wore a pure white gown with golden slippers and a jeweled tiara. Her father stood proudly at her side as he announced the arrival of the groom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the groom, Serpeggio." The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and all eyes turned to look. When Serpeggio entered the room, flanked by his parents, the music suddenly stopped, and a deafening gasp could be heard from the audience. No one said a word as Serpeggio slithered his way to Granonia. "Your son," stammered Stolto, "is a snake?" Matteo nodded. The king waved his arms in the air and yelled, "The wedding is off!" Granonia interjected, "But father, you gave him your word. If you go back on it now, you'll undermine your own authority." The king stared at his daughter incredulously. "You can't be seriously considering this marriage?" he sputtered. Granonia nodded and said, "Serpeggio might be a snake, but he is clearly an enchanted one. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt." King Stolto was too stunned to speak, so the wedding continued. After the ceremony, the couple went to the bridal chamber. Granonia's mother was biting her nails in a fit of anxiety. "I don't want to think about what he'll do to her in there," she said right before fainting. The king's nerves were shot, too, but he managed to stay on his feet. He ran up to the door of the chamber and peeped through the keyhole. Inside he could see the snake giving his daughter a passionate kiss on the face. Stolto almost had a heart attack. Then suddenly the snake started to shed its skin. Underneath all those white, glossy scales was a handsome, naked prince. Granonia was pleased. "I knew it," she said. Stolto saw things a little differently through the keyhole. From his perspective, it looked like the snake was transforming into a hideous dragon. "I'll save you, princess!" he shouted as he kicked open the door. Seeing the empty snakeskin on the floor, Stolto quickly picked it up and threw it into the fire. "No, don't!" shouted Serpegio. But it was too late. As the skin crackled and twisted in the fire, so did Serpegio. He screamed in agony. Granonia's heart broke in two as she helplessly watched her new husband writhe in pain. Many doctors were summoned to treat poor Serpegio, but none could help him. He had second-degree burns all over his skin. Granonia wept as she stood next to her unconscious spouse. King Stolto asked the most senior doctor, "Can anything be done for him?" The doctor shook his head and said, "I'm afraid he's dying. It would take a miracle to cure him." Granonia wept harder. That evening Granonia sat on her bed, staring out of the window. Her tears had run dry, so she couldn't weep any more. "What can I do?" she said to herself. Then she had an idea. She went to the library and read as many books about magic as she could get her hands on. In the last book on the shelf, she found a clue: Miracle Mountain. Granonia eagerly read the chapter twice. Miracle Mountain was a place full of enchantment. Hidden in the dense forests were magical creatures and plants. "That's where I'll find a cure," she declared. The next morning, Granonia announced that she was embarking on a quest to cure her husband. The king and queen tried to dissuade her, but were unsuccessful. She put on her riding outfit, saddled her horse, packed her bags, and was off in a flash. It took a week for her to reach Miracle Mountain. Once she arrived, she set up camp and started consulting the book. "There must be some plant or animal that can help me," she murmured as she thumbed through the pages. Suddenly a charming voice said, "I'm an animal that can help." Granonia whipped around and was surprised to see a talking fox. "How can you help me?" she asked. "I know all the secrets of this mountain, and some secrets about your kingdom, Princess Granonia," replied the fox. Granonia explained her predicament to the fox, who listened patiently even though he already knew everything. Then it was the fox's turn to explain. "Serpegio is actually a prince from the kingdom of Vallelunga, which is on the other side of this mountain. 7 years ago he was cursed by a witch, who turned him into a snake. He was taken in by a kind gardener and his wife in your kingdom, Princess. Serpegio, being a well-read prince, knew that the only cure for a witch's curse is the love of a princess. So he begged his father to ask the king for your hand in marriage. However, there was a catch. He would be forever linked to the snakeskin. Whatever happened to it happened to him. The only way to sever the link and cure him is with the blood of a phoenix." Granonia listened with bated breath as the fox spoke. She asked how phoenix blood could be acquired. The fox replied, "Only the song of a virtuous maiden can attract the phoenix. If you sing, I can climb the tree and catch the phoenix." Granonia immediately started warming up her vocal cords. The song that flowed out of her mouth that evening was the most bittersweet song that you could ever hear. It could flood one's mind with old childhood memories while simultaneously drowning one's heart in sorrow. It didn't take long for the phoenix to appear on a branch in a nearby tree. While Granonia distracted the phoenix with her beautiful song, the fox silently crept up the tree. With a wild squawk and a shower of feathers, the fox had seized the phoenix in its jaws. Granonia was so happy she felt like she was floating on air. Unfortunately, what happened next brought her crashing back down to earth. The fox smiled at the princess and said, "Goodbye, princess. Thanks for the help." He then bounded off the branch and disappeared into the dark forest with the phoenix still in his jaws. Granonia tried to run after him, but quickly lost sight of the sneaky fox. She stopped in front of a copse, wondering which way to go. From the darkness she heard the fox laugh and say, "Run as fast as you can, princess, but you'll never catch me. I know this forest like the back of my hand." "Did he stop just to laugh at me?" thought Granonia. The fox laughed again and said, "I'm actually very grateful to you. With this phoenix blood, I'll make a fortune in Vallelunga." This last statement gave the princess an idea. She said, "Well, I guess you beat me, you sly fox. I have no choice but to go home and say goodbye to my beloved." She turned and walked back to her camp. Granonia, however, did not have any intention of going back home empty-handed. Instead, she rode as hard as she could for Vallelunga. Upon reaching the first walled city, she hired the local printer to whip up a few posters. They portrayed a rather unflattering image of the fox, with the words, "Wanted dead or alive," printed underneath. Below these words was printed the reward money, $50. Granonia took these posters and hung them up in the main market square. Now she had only to wait. The fox, being very confident that he had outwitted the princess, took his time in arriving at the town. His first stop was the market square, where he planned to sell some phoenix blood. But on the way he saw one of Granonia's posters. "That looks nothing like me," he grumbled. "My nose isn't that big." Then the proud fox saw the reward amount and was insulted. $50! I'm worth at least 3 times that amount." The fox began tearing down every poster he found. When he came to the last poster, he was hit with a surprise. A large stick wielded by Granonia. She bonked him right on the head, knocking him out cold. The princess triumphantly lifted up the phoenix like an athlete lifting up a golden trophy. "Now to take you home," she said. A new worry crept into Granonia's mind. She had been gone so long, she was worried that Serpegio was already dead. She decided to ask for help from the king and queen of Vallelunga, who were, in fact, Serpegio's parents. After a hurried explanation of her situation, the royal couple pledged to help her in any way they could. "Living so close to Miracle Mountain," explained the king, "we have learned many magical skills." He handed a couple of yellow sugar cubes to Granonia and said, "Feed these to your horse, and he will fly you home lickety-split." Granonia followed the king's suggestion, and her horse was transformed into a huge eagle. With the phoenix tucked into her backpack, the princess hopped on the eagle's back and yelled, "Home!" Before she could blink, the eagle was rushing over the treetops like a bat out of hell. When she reached her home castle, Granonia raced into Serpegio's room. "Out of the way!" she bellowed as she shoved the doctor onto the floor. The princess then squeezed some blood out of the phoenix into a golden cup. She put this cup into Serpegio's lips and prayed. Slowly his eyes opened, and he whispered, "Where is my dear Granonia?" Granonia felt great joy at hearing this. She hugged him wholeheartedly. "Ouch!" cried Serpegio. "I'm not finished healing yet." Granonia backed away a little and gave her husband a light peck on the cheek instead. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," he replied. "Besides, a little pain is a good seasoning for constant love." Questions. Number 1. What did Sapatella find in the woods? A. A snake. B. A fox. C. Magic beans. D. Gold. The answer is A. A snake. Question 2. How did Matteo convince King Stolto to let his son marry the princess? A. He grew some golden fruit trees. B. He grew a golden beard. C. He found a golden apple. D. He paid the king a lot of money. The answer is A. He grew some golden fruit trees. Question 3. What was the cure for Serpegio's illness? A. Phoenix blood. B. Phoenix feathers. C. Phoenix toenails. D. Phoenix liver. The answer is A. Phoenix blood. Question 4. Why was Granonia able to outsmart the fox? A. The fox was too proud. B. The fox was too honest. C. The fox was too gullible. D. The fox was very young. The answer is A. The fox was too proud.